Hello everyone, and welcome to the third video of my mini-series on how to set up Planetary Annihilation. This video is a follow-up of my previous two ones on mods and settings, and it will be covering what is arguably the most important and influential mod in the game, namely Hotbuild 2. So, if you haven't seen my first video, I will just very quickly walk you through on how to get Hotbuild. You want to go to the Community Mods tab over here, then you want to go to Available. You go to the search box and you type Hotbuild. It's going to pop up. After you install it and enable it, you go back to the main menu. So the first thing you want to do is set up your Hotbuild. And there are quite a few quirks, so I'll try and go over pretty much everything that I've discovered about this in my many years of using it. The first thing you want to notice is if you go in your settings menu to gameplay, you're going to see that there is a tab entirely dedicated to Hotbuild. The only thing you should care about is this thing here, which is called Hotbuild Reset Timer. You either want to leave it where it is, or you want to max it out. And I'll explain what this does a little bit later, but basically I recommend for pretty much everyone to just set it out to maximum value. So once you've done that, you actually want to set up your Hotbuild. So for that, you go over right here in the right hand corner to the Hotbuild bar. And when you click this, this is what you see. So let me just very quickly go through the legend. This is going to be an outlay of your keyboard. So black keys are unassigned, blue keys are things that are used by your keyboard settings, so everything we assigned in the previous video, and then keys that are highlighted in purple also have Hotbuild. So you can see that some of my keys have both a blue and a purple tint, and some of them have only purple tint. This is because you can assign both a command and units to an individual key, so keep that in mind. You'll also see that some of my keys are only blue, even though they're quite central and very basically exactly where you want to be placing your keyboard hand. And that's the reason because some of them are mutually exclusive with having a unit on it. For example, selecting all land combat units, it's probably not a good idea to also have a land combat unit on it, because if you click it, it will automatically filter through everything. So if, say, I have docks on this key, if I click docks, it will just, there is a chance that it will, instead of selecting all the combat units on my screen, it will only select the docks on my screen. That could be something you want, that could be something you don't want, so just keep that in mind. So, how do you do this? How does this whole thing work? Well, the first important thing to understand is Hotbuild can be imported and exported. So you can save your settings, and this is really valuable. If, say, you have a fresh install of the game, or you're switching devices, or if you're changing between factions, which I'll cover a little bit later in the video, then what you do is you export, which saves all your settings in Hotbuild, and then you import the other one. A really important thing when importing and general changing Hotbuild settings is they will not only change the layout, so the purple stuff, they will also reset every single setting you have. And to give you an example, here you have the community defaults. And again, for example, I have select all land combat units on screen. If I go and I switch to this, you see it will reset everything. And now all of a sudden this is move up. This is now camera controls. So be very careful with using the community defaults because they will wipe all of your game settings. So let's very quickly import my actual one. And yeah, now we're back. Cool. So let's talk about how this thing actually works and what you can do with it. There are two main things you want to know about it. The first thing is you can assign multiple buildings, units, stuff to a single key, and that affects how this key operates. So for example here on my E key, I have my energy extractors and then I have a bunch of units. And I'll demonstrate this later again, but this means that whenever I select a fabricator and I click E, the first time I click E, it will show me a blueprint of energy. So I'll be able to put down energy plants. If I hit E twice, it will toggle to the second one. So conversely here, I have a bunch of factories on my X key. If I click X once, bot factory. If I click X twice, air factory, etc., etc., etc. Now this doesn't mean that if I click X 5 times I'm going to get a pelican, because it only toggles between the stuff that is currently available for building. So if, for example, I select a bunch of land factories, some air factories, some tank factories, some bot factories, and click T, which is my fabricator command, then all of them will be queued to their respective stuff. It will not require toggling. So that's the first thing you want to know. The second thing is toggles, which I mentioned earlier, are reset. So if you wait for a certain amount of time, this thing that I mentioned here will automatically reset. And I'll demonstrate this in-game as well, but it's really, really important to know. So some guiding principles on how you want to set up your Hotbuild. I will also put a link to a download of this, so a download of mine, which is really well optimized. So this one is made to be as ergonomic as possible, but it's also compatible with my specific settings layout, as I covered in my previous video. So if you want to find this and if you want to look into it, copy some stuff, remove some stuff, then yeah, sure, you can do that. So the first thing is you want to avoid, as I mentioned earlier, commands and units being on the same thing. So for example, the attack command, you don't want to have anything other than the attack, because then if you click it, it will also work as a filtering. Conversely, alt fire, which is something that only the commander has, is something that you can put a bunch of units on. But also you can put structures that the commander cannot build. So for example, laser towers, not advanced, but the double laser towers are something that only fabricators can build and the commander cannot. Therefore, there's no risk of, if I select my commander and I click D for the Uber cannon, there's no risk that I accidentally build a turret instead. But you want to be mindful of this when you're selecting multiple things at the same time. The second major thing is you want to avoid putting things that are similar or that are coming out of the same things that are coming out of the same factory on the same hotkey. So you'll notice that I don't have almost any tier 1 unit that is coming out from the same factory on the same hotkey. I have my ants here, and then I have like tank factory, air factory, bot factory. None of them are from the same factory. You'll notice for things like D, or I think it was my E key, it's my C key, that I have stuff that is on the same tier 2 factory. So Kestrels and Icarus. And this is really important. This means you want to be very careful when using Hotbuild to queue stuff in your factories, in your T2 factories, because then if you click C twice instead of just once, it will make one Kestrel and one Icarus. So that's something to keep in mind that I'll demonstrate later. And the last thing, which I'll also show you, is how you can add factions. But let's very quickly jump into a game and showcase all of this. We're gonna have to wait a minute for PA to launch the sandbox game. And there we go. Let's land somewhere randomly. Well, this is not really relevant for now, but you'll see in a second. So, I have my commander. Here's what happens. The moment I land, the first thing I want to do is I want to make a bot factory. As you can see down here, the factories all have an X. Now, if you remember, the bot factory is the first one on my cycle. So if I click X just once, it will allow me to build a bot factory. And then I can queue some metal, some air factories, a vehicle factory, etc. The thing that I mentioned earlier with the timeout setting in the first menu is if I click X and wait for a couple of seconds, the toggle is disabled. It's as if the cycle is reset. If I click X again, it will be the same factory. And similarly, if I say toggle to a vehicle factory, the next one in line should be naval, which should not be showing because this is a land factory. But because I've waited for long enough, if I click X again, it will be a bot factory. So be mindful of that. If you don't want this, then you want to set the timeout that I mentioned earlier to the max possible value. The other really important thing to understand about Hotbuild is how army selection works. So here I have a bot factory. I can click with my mouse, or I can click with the keyboard, D a couple of times, then C for sparks, and then E for stingers. And now this factory will be cycling between these units. So I don't need to move my mouse up and down from the center of the screen where it's supposed to be to the build bar menu, which is really, really useful. And if, say, I want only a single fabricator, I can hold Control, I can click T, and now it will make one fabricator, and then this will disappear from the future queue. So this is why it's really useful for saving time, especially if you're not using the auto factory mod. The second thing is how this works with selection. So let's make some units. Let's get some air first. So a couple of bombers and maybe a couple of Icarus. Not Icarus, I mean Pelicans. So you see that when I click S, this selects all my air. Now I can filter through this. If I want just my fighters, I click D, and now my fighters are filtered. If I want just my bombers, I click S again, which is all air, and then E, and now I can send my bombers elsewhere. Or if I want to get my Pelicans to pick up some stuff, click S again for select all air, X for filtering Pelicans, and then I can order them to come and pick some stuff in. Maybe go and drop them somewhere else. And as you see, for all of this, I haven't had to move my mouse anywhere outside of the center. This means I can very quickly and efficiently give commands to a bunch of different units in quick succession. So that's the basics. And finally, the last thing I want to cover is how this looks like with advanced factories and why you want to be really, really careful. So let's print a T2 air factory. Notice here that I have both fighter types on D, and the reason for this is because they have a similar role, and whenever I want to select my all air and I want to get just my fighters, I want to have both my T1 and my T2 fighters. That's why they're assigned to the same key. So if I make some of these guys, actually no, let me demonstrate this without using my mouse. So let's say I want only advanced fighters. If I start clicking D, you will notice that this will be making a mixture of the two because they're on the same key. So for T2 factories, this is going to be rare, but you are going to have to manually queue stuff up. So be really mindful of that. Same goes for Icarus. I cannot just make Kestrels. It will be making a mix of the two if I'm using just the hotkey. So it's best to just clear everything and then assign a specific ratio with your mouse, and now this works properly. The last thing I want to cover is factions, because a peculiarity of a peculiarity of Hotbuild is you can only assign units to it from other factions or from server mods in general if you're in a game, like actively in a game with that faction being enabled. So as you see, I have bugs enabled. So if I go to game and settings and Hotbuild, I now have all the bug stuff. But as you saw earlier, I only had blue stuff. I only had the base game or MLA units and structures available. So what you want to do is you want to save and export your current settings, and then you want to make a new one for the separate faction. So I'll just show you what I currently have because I have a separate save for bugs already created. And here you can see I have the green ones and the bug naval factories. So this is my bug Hotbuild, but this will not work at all with MLA. So that's the major thing. And to very quickly show you why this is important, if we go back to the main menu, and go to settings, Hotbuild, even though I have bugs enabled, there's no green units, it's just not showing. So if you want to set up for like Hotbuild 2 also for Legion or for bugs, you need to go make an AI game or like a sandbox game or something where the mode is enabled, and then you can add all the units to the respective kill keys. The final thing is just a very quick overview of how this actually works mechanically, because it can be a bit iffy at times. And the way you want to assign units is, let's first clear everything. So you're clearing them by clicking the little square at the edge. So now my D key is free. Let's say I want to add some flak. What you do is you click it, you hold drag, and you move. And before you release, you want to make sure that there's this blue field under it, and then you can release. Otherwise, if I just move, nothing happens. So you want to make sure that the blue field shows and then release. And the second thing is, when you're deciding on the order of units, you want to move, and then you want to put it to the very top. The very top will always be able to align it. The blue field will appear, and then you can move it up and down and rank it properly. So again, the very top always works. Sometimes the bottom takes a little bit longer, and then after that you can give it whatever order you want in terms of toggling. So this is everything you need to know about Hotbuild. The last thing is sometimes it will not save because it's a bit of a feisty mod. It has its own spirit. So if you don't see a certain key lighting up, you want to click another one and then go back. This way you know it didn't save. So sometimes when this happens, you just need to close the settings, or you need to hit F5, which will refresh the UI, and then you can try again. So let's try again. Let's erase some stuff. D stopped lighting up, and let's put a factory in. And again, it didn't work, so you close settings and you restart. Especially when you have a lot of keys, you will sometimes have to just save and then exit and then try again. So we've had this, we changed another key, and now it's here. Keep this in mind. At times you just have to double check everything. It's just a mod that's not very reliable under setup, but is really, really reliable in game. So that's everything you need to know regarding Hotbuild, and I hope this was useful to you. Please subscribe and like if you enjoyed this video, and good luck on the battlefield.